Like, you can apply to all of them, but it only takes one program to say yes.
I was excited to be around the people, and maybe it had a lot to do with being, freshly exposed to this incredible specialty. But even the long days, I didn't dread waking up and going to the rotation the next day. Definitely do think that my research year is solidified.
Welcome back to another episode of Open Globe Talk. This is your host, Rizal Nathani, and today I am joined by two of my colleagues that I shared the ophthalmology application journey, and it is so surreal to be joining them in this segment, talking about how their journey was and what ophthalmology residency is like. And so first guest here is Dr. Aziza Dhalai, who is a PGY2 at the University of Wisconsin-Madison Ophthalmology Residency Program. And our second guest is Dr. Alana Bryant, who is a PGY1. Welcome, guys. It's a pleasure having you here today.
Thanks, Rizal. It's a pleasure being here, and thank you so much for the invite. I appreciate the opportunity that you've given us to kind of speak about our experiences. Like Rizal said, I'm a PGY2 at the University of Wisconsin, and happy to be here.
Before we kind of begin with a little bit about how things have gone when you tried and applied into ophthalmology, I wanted to ask both of you, given that all three of us in this frame came from medical schools that weren't affiliated with ophthalmology residency program, how did you navigate the ophthalmology journey in terms of seeking the resources, and when did you sought those resources?
I think applying as an applicant to a specialty like ophthalmology, which is, everyone knows, is quite competitive. So I think starting out knowing that you're coming from a medical school that doesn't have a residency program, you already feel like you're a step behind or you're lacking something. And I think all of us kind of just had to work a little harder to make up for what we lack in letters or experiences. For me, I started very early on. I'd say probably my M2 year of kind of letting my program know that, hey, I'm interested in ophthalmology. And I came from a program that, one, it was fairly new. I was only part of the third class, and we don't have a residency program in the state. So the opportunities just weren't there. I think coordinating with my program and kind of speaking to them and just trying to figure out ways that I can, build up my application very early on. I knew that that was something that I'd have to do just because of what we lack. I think I was able through my medical school to make connections with community ophthalmologists, kind of more private practice. I was able to get research projects with a couple of private practice ophthalmologists. I was able to work with an ophthalmologist who worked out of Nellis Air Force Base, who's now the program director at Walter Reed. So I think just seeking out these opportunities, and it wasn't research that was published in major journals, but it was just, hey, this is an effort I made with what I had, and I think they were just really great opportunities. Not knowing how to navigate, I had to talk to other applicants. I think I met Rizal on the application cycle a couple of years ago, kind of picking her brain. Well, what do you do, or who do I talk to, or which conferences are important to go to? So I think kind of leaning on my medical school, leaning on other applicants and people that I've met along the way, just really helped kind of shape my experience and my path. Coming from a medical school that I was the first to apply. I was the first to show interest. Me and another medical student who was a year behind, we established our ophthalmology interest group. We established our respectable, branch at our medical school. So it was like doing things for the first time and just kind of figuring it out along the way.
And for context, Respectable is an organization that recycles glasses. Is that correct?
Correct. So we collect glasses from the community. We clean them, we label them, we figure out what the prescription on the glasses is, and we send them back to the Respectable organization, I think out of Minnesota. And what they do is they list them online, and they'll list the prescription, and anyone can go onto the website and purchase these glasses either for a small donation, and if you can't make a donation, then you just pay for the shipping costs. They're not, going to be a perfect fit, but it's better than having to pay hundreds of dollars out of pocket for glasses.
So very informational, and certainly it shows the grit that you had to have in order to make those resources come together. Alana, you're closer to me in the East Coast, and you were pretty good about reaching out as well. So tell us a little bit about how you got started, like what year in medical school, and then what sorts of resources did you find outside of your medical school?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today, Rusul. It's great to see you. I know the last time I saw you was literally before we were certain in what we were doing with our futures and whether we would match or not. And now we're both here. So I'm really grateful to be here. As far as your question goes, I'm kind of a late bloomer in ophthalmology. I hate to use the term discover, but I wasn't exposed to ophthalmology in a meaningful way until late in my third year of medical school. And it was honestly on accident. The surgery coordinator, when we were doing our clinical clerkships, said, hey, we've got a couple extra spots in ENT, a couple spots in ophthalmology, and anybody who wants them, it's kind of up for first grabs. So I talked to some upperclassmen and they said, ooh, do the ophtho rotation. It's great. It's going to fly by. Everybody's so nice. It's so much fun. It's not that hard. And you can, move on with your life. And so I signed up for it. I wanted to be an OBGYN, but I realized that wasn't super in alignment with what I wanted out of my career. And then I spent 2 weeks at Vanderbilt. So thankfully, Meharry and Vanderbilt have what's called the Meharry-Vanderbilt Alliance. And so for resources that aren't always available at Meharry, Vanderbilt will kind of take us under their wing to support the medical students. And what kind of grew from that is the ophthalmology interested students, even though we were few and far between. We had opportunities to work with the medical students at Vanderbilt in their ophthalmology interest group with their attendings. They invited us for away rotations and also like the core clinical clerkships if we were interested. And so I spent 2 weeks at Vanderbilt, which really piqued my interest in ophthalmology and just kind of secured interest and exposure to something new in the field. And so because they were so welcoming and receptive to having Meharry students, they were kind of our primary resource. So yes, I was exposed to ophthalmology late in my third year, but I planned on applying that same year too. And so I got involved in our ophthalmology interest group. There were only 5 of us total that were applying. We were only the second class in I think a decade at Meharry who wanted to apply. And so there weren't that many resources for us. We had Dr. Matthew Katz, who was an incredible mentor, but just didn't have the bandwidth to support, a handful of students who are interested in pursuing ophthalmology. So we leaned a lot into Vanderbilt. I'm really grateful to Dr. Janice Law, Dr. Dolly Padavani. They have just really done a lot for us in supporting us. So they kind of established a strong network for us to have there, as well as being able to be as involved as we wanted to. And we didn't have to do as much outsourcing. It wasn't as, from the boots ground up like Aziza was doing, and was able to kind of more easily transition into the field with established networks.
Yeah. And that's actually very fortunate to have such a great institution next to you, and having this alliance where you can share resources. It's not often possible. And what also interests me is how you came to make it into ophthalmology, having decided at the end of third year. Often I think the pressure is unfair to put on people that they have to decide on a specialty right when they get into ophthalmology or right when they get into medical school, or even beforehand. It's very rare to find someone like Aziza who already knows what they want and then isn't distracted by pursuing another specialty, right? So the natural course you would expect is kind of like how Alana has approached it, where at the end of third year, she's made this informed decision that this is what she wants to do. So I resonate more with Alana's journey, but I also resonate with Aziza because I also went into medical school wanting to do ophthalmology, but I wasn't able to voice that opinion as much because I knew I was going to a place that didn't have ophthalmology residency. So Aziza, one question, I wanted to explore is what were some barriers that you faced someone starting in medicine later on in their career? I think your story alone is very inspiring for a lot of folks. You started medicine after you started having a family, and both your kids were pretty well grown up until when you decided to do that. So for anybody who's listening, who's also starting medicine at a later phase and wants to pursue a competitive specialty, how did you manage that? What were the feelings like when you were deciding to do medical school?
Great question. I think kind of going back to it and then starting and committing and saying, you know what, I think I'm going to take that leap and try. I think that was kind of my mantra. If you say I'll just try. I'm just going to give it a shot and see what happens. I didn't want to, years to pass and then wonder what if. So I was like, I'm just going to give it a shot. I will get my bachelor's degree. I'll submit a couple applications and see what happens. And it worked out. So I was like, okay, well then I want to do ophthalmology. So let's just see. it's not that easy. Of course, it was hard. There were a lot of obstacles. Like, sure, you have a family. You have obligations outside of this. But I think if you want something bad enough, you'll find ways to make it happen. So kind of leaning onto my family, leaning onto friends and things like that for support definitely helped. But I don't think, going back after you've already had a career or, being a non-traditional student, I don't think it's impossible. If you are convinced that this is what you want to do and, you're dedicated, it's worth a shot. Like, you should just try. I get very excited when I, meet people or hear from people who are thinking about it. Like, just try. You never know. I've never come across anyone through this journey of applying to medical school or applying to ophthalmology that has said, well, you're a little older or you're not a traditional applicant or a traditional student that has perceived it negatively. So I don't understand why you shouldn't try. I have never come across anyone who has discounted me just because I'm a little older or that I've already had a family or anything like that. So I don't think being a little older or starting later in the game has had any obstacles for me personally. I think I faced the same amount of obstacles that anyone else has. You have to study, you have to get the grades, you're putting in the clinical hours and things like that. You just have obligations outside of this one path that you're pursuing, but I don't think it's any different otherwise from any other applicant.
Yeah. And that's a great way of approaching it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think reaching out to your support group is really important. You stayed close to family. Is that correct?
Exactly. So I knew that I can't, throw out this vast net of applications to medical schools. I knew I wanted to stay in the state of Nevada, and it was either the University of Nevada, Reno or the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and it worked out. And I think I had an incredible experience going to, the Kirk School of Medicine. A lot of people ask, like, oh, are you sure you want to go to a fairly new school? Like, they're not accredited yet. I didn't have any issues. I had a fantastic experience. And if anything, it speaks to where I am now. I don't think that I lost any opportunities going to a new school. So if anyone is, entering a new program or a fairly new program, I don't think that it would create any obstacles for you.
And what sort of things told you that this school was better for you as opposed to a more established program? Because I think a lot of candidates may not have that option or may have that option, but, they're deciding, well, one place has more established resources than the other.
I think being from Las Vegas and being from the community and just kind of watching how the medical school came to fruition and how the community was really behind the medical school, speaking to leadership, talking personally, knew the dean. And he gave every medical student his personal cell phone number at the time. Everyone in the admissions team, you had their cell phone number. So we had a very tight-knit group. And early on interviewing and getting to know them, it was a very personal, close-knit type of feeling that I got from everyone. So I knew everyone was doing everything that they could for this program to succeed. So I had no doubts that we would be okay and I would get a valuable and amazing experience going, even though it was a new program.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's kind of like the point where, you're not picking an institution, you're picking the people that are going to support you. And at the end of the day, if the people aren't going to fit with your personality or your needs, then it's just, at the end of medical school, it's just a paper that's hanging at the wall.
You're going to get we all had the exact same, medical curriculum. It's exactly the same. We take the same exams. So it's the people that sets it apart. I think knowing that I was comfortable and just going with my gut feeling that I really connected with these people and I trust that I'm going to get, a good education and I'm going to get all the tools that I need to succeed. So I think that's kind of a theme with my journey is it's more connecting to people than it is about how long this institution has been in place or what famous physician graduated from this one. It's more of how do you feel when you're around these people? And, I think applicants are looking at programs and it's like, well, this one has this, but as much as they're interviewing you, you should be interviewing them. How do you feel when you're surrounded by these people?
Yeah. And Alana, I know that you did a research year and obviously that's understandable given that you decided at the end of your third year that you wanted to do ophthalmology. Can you share kind of like how you navigated finding a research mentor and then also studying for STEP during that period, because I know you were sharing a lot of that information in your social media. And I thought, that's a lot of work to be able to put in, trying to do publications, but then also managing this other phase that you have to do for your applications going forward.
Of course. So kind of how I fell into ophthalmology, I also fell into my research year. To be completely honest, I would have applied that same cycle, even though I had had such late exposure to ophthalmology, but I failed step one. And the way that my medical school's curriculum was set up was that we take step one right before we start our M3 clerkships. And so when I took my step one exam, I think, when was it? May of my second year. I didn't pass. And then they had just revamped it to become the pass-fail system. And so they were trying to kind of work out the kinks. And so there was a 12-week waiting period before we got our scores back. And so I wasn't able to retake the exam in time to also apply that cycle. And so afterwards, I was like, oh gosh, I can't apply with, a repeat step one and no research. And I just got involved in this field. I don't really know who's going to take me seriously and take my interest in this field seriously. So I kind of started scrambling. And by the time I had, retaken and passed step one, I had been introduced to the Rab Venable program, which I'll kind of touch on in a little bit. But I was scrambling looking for research. And while I was at the Rab Venable NMA annual conference, I was trying to network my butt off. And I was asking anybody that I could, hi, do you have any research opportunities? Do you know anyone who could connect me with someone? And it was my first time networking for real, because the previous conference that I'd been to was kind of hi, my name's Alana. I just want to get to know you and it's great to meet you. And you can just kind of have casual conversation. But this time I was actually putting the work in to try and get a research year out of it. Unfortunately, every person that I talked to, it ended up being a big fat no. And by that time, I think it was January. And the application cycle had passed and I was still trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do? Because M3 is almost finished and I need to kind of get my ducks in a row. So I went to Twitter and I just started tweeting, hi, I'm new to ophthalmology. I don't have any real mentors in this field yet, but I am a really hardworking person. And if anybody's willing to take me on as a mentee, I would love to work with you. And so my mentor, Dr. Sayoko Roy, she reached out to me. She sent me a Twitter DM and she said, hi, I'd be happy to serve as your virtual mentor. And I didn't know who she was when she messaged me, but if you don't know, she's the chair of Ohio State's ophthalmology program. And I emailed her and we were able to work together around my really wonky last minute schedule. And she was able to put together a really rigorous research year for me to work through. And then I did my research year and God willing, I matched. So I don't know if you want to hear a little bit more about the intricacies of my research year. I know you wanted to touch on step two and I can circle back to that too.
Yeah. I think that's the one thing that I also experienced because I did research years prior to going to ophthalmology residency. I think what was the hardest part was trying to find a mentor and not just researcher personally, who would be there to vouch for you when you apply for residency. And so in the sense that you found, a great mentor to mentor you, can I ask you, was it paid during the year that you did it?
My research year was paid. That was another reason so many people had said no, because I wouldn't have been able to afford to just have a year off of medical school without any income. Wouldn't be able to pay my rent and just kind of survive as a medical student. So yes, my opportunity was paid through one of her diversity grants, or RO1, if you're not familiar.
And I think that's really important to touch on for anybody who's also trying to accomplish a research year. I think with ophthalmology becoming even more competitive in today's time, we're only just, 1 or 2 years away from when we applied, but I think things have already ramped up into a different and more difficult direction. So when these things happen, how do you approach a mentor? I know you got approached by a mentor, but how did you kind of counter and ask the questions you think are vital to securing not just a research year, but technically someone who will pay you, will mentor you, will be someone you can count on for maybe in ophthalmology. So those are things that I wanted to ask you, Alana.
Thank you. That's also an excellent question. I think a lot of people get dead set on, okay, I need a mentor because I want XYZ, but they're not always looking for a person who's invested in their personal growth, their professional growth, everything that kind of falls in between that was going to essentially lead to your success. So I think the first step is when you are reaching out to mentors, whether it's cold emailing, which is essentially just kind of looking up a person online, looking into their research or looking into their background and shooting them an email, explaining what your interests are and what you're hoping to gain from a relationship. Or you can kind of more organically form a relationship with either, if you don't have an at-home program, local ophthalmologist, kind of like what Aziza explained a bit, and utilizing social media to the best of your power to just kind of get in touch with people. And then obviously, of course, if you're able to attend conferences or meetings. And one thing that I would always pick up on when I was interacting with people, if I knew that there was something that I wanted to gain or something that I could learn from these people, is just to kind of get to know them and see, are they interested in also knowing me as a person? Because if the conversation kind of stems from, hey, I only care about your research. Hey, I only care about what your grades are. Hey, I only care about X, Y, Z, but I don't really care about where you're from or what your values are or what you care about. That might not be a mentor who's as invested in your growth as a person and an applicant. So you just want to kind of cue into the little things that tell you, hey, does this person care about me holistically, or do they only want to help me match, or do they only want to help me get a research paper? And then as you kind of meet and network with more people, you'll be able to filter out, who you should lean on more. Who do you want your life to look like? Who do you think will advocate for you in in rooms that you're not present in, or give you opportunities, through their own personal connections. So I think it's worth taking the time to reach out to as many people as possible and then kind of do your own filtering based on their responses and the general investment that you kind of receive over time with keeping in touch with them.
And Alana, it can get really exhausting.
Yes.
I think we kind of gloss over it because now we're done with that phase of our life. But I can tell you that, and you will agree with me, that it can get really tiring trying to find that one unicorn mentor who is going to look past everything that is on paper, right? Like we can all agree that on paper and in person, people are completely different. You cannot measure work ethic by paper. Even if somebody has 1 million publications, I think like when you see them in the clinic taking care of patients, that's when you know how much they care about somebody in medicine. And that's something that, I think I'm glad that you mentioned that, we need to find people who look at you as a person as opposed to like a piece of paper. So when we talked about all of this, all three of us decided on ophthalmology because we came across certain experiences that we actually sought after. But how do you convince that this is the career that you will be happy with for the rest of your life? Because like nobody, you don't have a parent who's in ophthalmology. You don't have like necessarily somebody who's able to show you 20 years down the road, this is what life is like. And, in a professional setting, I don't think anybody can speak honestly about things that they find are disturbing, or maybe, happy things are happy. Obviously, people speak more about that. But how do you convince yourself about that?
So I think, so how I stumbled onto ophthalmology is from the work of Jeff Haven and seeing, kind of that Out of the Darkness documentary and just what an impact you're able to make with such a simple surgery. You're changing someone's quality of life. And all of medicine is important and every specialty makes a huge impact. But I think I really connected with just the services that we're able to work with and just restoring people's sight for me was my aha moment. And I think this is it. I think I found what I want to do with the rest of my life. We don't get a lot of exposure to ophthalmology. Even if you have a residency program at the medical school you go to, it's still very limited. It's not as much as you do in internal medicine and general surgery and, OB/GYN and peds. You're like incorporated into it. You're experiencing it all the time. So ophthalmology is limited for everyone. And I think for me, how I kind of knew like, yep, this is it. Every ophthalmologist I spoke to told me I would do this every time and time again. If I had to do residency over, it would be this specialty. No regrets. talk to general surgeons who are like, you know what, maybe if I could go back, I wouldn't. So for me, I already know what I want to do. You want to make an impact on someone's life, but I also want to enjoy it. And I feel like there's that kind of mix of you get to do surgery, you get to be in clinic. So you get kind of both of that. You get to build relationships with your patients. You can see them from early on and you can follow them into their entire lives. So I think with ophthalmology, you can make it what you want it to be. If you want to be a cataract surgeon that's just doing cataracts and that's it. If you want to tailor it to where you're seeing people and you're establishing those long-term relationships, I feel like ophthalmology is customizable and you can do with it what you want. And then just every ophthalmologist I've spoken to has been happy. So I think just getting that feedback that, yes, okay, I think I'm making the right choice.
I love the word that you use, customizable, because that actually makes me feel very excited for you and all of us in general to see how creative all of you will turn out to be in the way that you form your careers and pick your specialty or subspecialty and operate in ophthalmology that way. So that's a great point that you mentioned. And Alana, how did you grasp around this? Was it your mentor? Was it that research year that really cemented in you that, yeah, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
I can definitely say probably a mixture of both. The thing that drew me the most to ophthalmology and at least foreseeing that I could be happy in this career forever is that I was having so much fun every single day. I was excited to be around the people, and maybe it had a lot to do with being freshly exposed to this incredible specialty. But even the long days, I didn't dread waking up and going to the rotation the next day, like some of my other rotations were. I didn't wake up and say, okay, like I don't feel mentally prepared to go back in and deal with these types of diagnoses or comorbidities or whatever, the specialty is. I felt excited to show up every day in ophthalmology, which was a little different for me compared to some of the other specialties that I had spent some time in. I definitely do think that my research year solidified knowing that this was the place that I was supposed to be practicing in medicine, mostly because, there's a lot that we don't get exposed to as medical students that happens kind of behind the scenes. We kind of get like the tippy top layer of exposure, like practicing with the slit lamp and, seeing the residents do indirect exams and things. But doing the research and seeing the impact that ophthalmologists make on a person's life and really spending a significant amount of time working, because my research year, I was pretty lucky. I got to spend as much time as the attendings would let me shadow them in clinic, shadow them in the operating room. And part of my research was helping with the clinical trials that my mentor was running. So I was not only getting to see the research side, but also getting to see how patients are directly impacted by ophthalmic care. And I think it just made it, I don't know, really special. Similar to Aziza, it's like everybody's happy, everybody's showing up. They all, are well rested and they're still making an incredible impact on all these people's lives and qualities of life. So I think it was kind of a no-brainer for me after I spent enough time. And then the research year really put the nail in the coffin for me.
Yeah. And I think that shows like how important taking your time to explore specialties is. Something I kind of want to come back to, Aziza, is Alana did a research year, and a lot of people from newer medical schools are often told by advisors, you need a research year, right? So like what prevented you from, or what made you decide that, no, I don't want to do a research year, I'm ready to apply?
So my program told me the same thing. Like we looked at the stats and we looked at the numbers and it's like, okay, we're new. You're not going to have as strong of letters as everyone else is going to have. We highly recommend. And we sat down several times with, administrators and my dean, like, hey, we really think you should do a research year. And I thought about it, but like Alana said, I just couldn't afford to take a year off. I couldn't afford to not be paid. So I was willing to just risk it. I think at the end of the day, I looked at it as I can apply. And if it doesn't work out, I could take a research year, or I could take this whole research year and I could still not match. So for me, it was just, let's just give it a shot and see what happens. Just at the end of the day, it's going to work out the way it's going to work out. And I was okay with not matching the first year. I think I had, after a long conversations with Rasul and hours and hours on the phone about crying and whining and whatever, it was like the worst thing that could happen for me personally. And I'm not, giving advice to anyone to do what I did. But for me, I was like, okay, the worst thing that could happen is I don't match. What would happen if I don't match? then I can pursue a research here and figure it out. I can take it from there. But I just felt strongly enough and figured that I could just give it a shot and see what happens. But went against the advice of my medical school and people who, knew what they're talking about. The numbers were there and, they were right, but it'll work out. Don't worry about it.
I love that answer. And you're right. I think at the end of the day, the decision lies in your hands and how confident you are. I can say that one of the things I've learned from you guys and from my own experience as well is that a lot of it has to do with confidence. The opportunities you get, it doesn't matter how many opportunities you get. I think it's making the most out of the few that come your way and making the most out of them, right? And I think Aziza and Alana are both examples of that. And I say a lot for Aziza because, both of you guys are in a fantastic residency program. And a lot of people, prior to applying would have told you otherwise, right? And I think the fact that you navigated the channels to make sure that you got in front of the people that made those decisions to get into residency is very powerful. A lot of people kind of give up even trying for those opportunities. And sometimes things happen serendipitously. I won't go into details and say, how did you get into X, Y, and Z residency? I think these are tiny steps and aspects of your journey where you made the most out of every opportunity that came your way.
I don't know who told me this, whether there was a mentor or I don't know. But I think I remember someone said it only takes one program to say yes. You can apply to all of them, but it only takes one program to say yes. So for me, I think the important thing was, okay, well, find a program that you resonate with, connect with those people. And if that connection is there, then that's what you're going off of. They're going off metrics, they're going off scores, you're going off research experiences. But I think at the end of the day, the most important thing is connect with a program personally that you believe in their mission statement, you believe in what they're doing. And I feel like that's kind of what happened for me. Very fortunate to do an away rotation at the University of Wisconsin. Loved it. Loved every single person I interacted with. And I just knew it was the second away rotation that I did. And I remember talking to mentors do I need to do the third one? I already know, why am I wasting my time? And they're like, whoa, that's not how the rotation cycle works. You shouldn't burn any bridges. And it's okay, I'll complete, everything that I was set out to do. But I just knew I connected with this program. And I think that is a strategy that I would recommend is instead of throwing out, all these applications, think sincerely about where do you want to be and what do you connect with about this program? I admit I probably applied to every single program, but at the end of the day, I knew that this is where I wanted to be because I spent time here on the ground. I saw, the learning experiences. I worked with attendings. There's exam skills that I learned here because I didn't have the opportunities at my program. So every time I check for cell on a patient, I remember Dr. Larson who taught me on my OA, this is how you check for cell. So a lot of the foundation for my exam skills, in ophthalmology, I learned here. So I just felt okay, this is a great fit for me.
Yeah. And I will say that I learned my exam skills from away rotations as well. And it was actually very scary at the beginning, but thankfully the program that I went to helped a lot with giving autonomy and entrusting that, hey, you can do this. And it was really fun. I'm somebody who likes to learn in a quiet corner and then come out and try to see how much I've performed. So it's fun.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Kind of looking at this is how they're treating medical students. Man, I wonder how they're treating their residents. So that spoke volumes.
Yeah. No, that's an absolutely great way of measuring where you want to go, because oftentimes I think people worry so much about if they will get in. But, you're building a career, and although you have to believe in yourself, you have to appreciate the people that are there who are going to be teaching you.
Right. Back and what matters to you. So like I said, as much as they're interviewing you, you should also be interviewing them.
Right. Not to sound cocky, of course, but this is kind of like your life, you gotta
Of course, yeah, this is the next 4 years of your life. And, you know, why rank a program that you didn't enjoy being at just because, they are ranked whatever, or they have this opportunity or this, whatever it is. I would choose how I feel and how I, interacted with people at the OA rotation over any other metric.
Yep. Talking about all of these wonderful aspects of applying into ophthalmology, doing these OA rotations, if you could go back, how would you navigate the residency application side of things? We've already talked about interviewing the program as well as how they're interviewing you, and then making sure that you're aware of how, residencies treat their OA rotation to see it as a metric and how they treat their residents.
To be completely honest, I think having the Rab Venable program helped me not need to, I don't think I would go back and change too much about my application process, because they, a lot of the people that have kind of paved the way are like, hey, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 through 100 things are what's going to get you to work through the door. Are you willing to put the work in to do it? And a lot of that kind of, I don't know, I think if you let that shine through in your residency process, through the questions that you're asking, through how much you're reaching out to the residents at the program, through asking your mentors to talk to their network on your behalf, I think all of that kind of comes from the same place of drive. So if you're applying to residency, you have the drive. You just need to put those skills into action and let people know exactly what your intentions are. I also kind of used Aziza's metrics the most for residency applications. I knew that on paper, my retaken step 1 was a big red flag. So I did 3 OA rotations to go and showcase myself and say, hey, I'm more than, what you might think my application is. And I am very dedicated and I am, XYZ. And then that will help your application be a little more holistic if the program knows you and if you can take the time to establish relationships, just like Aziza was saying. So if you are applying, I think the biggest advice is just, like Aziza said, connect with the program where you can. And if you're not asking questions on the residency trail, thoughtful questions, not just questions that kind of fill space, but what are things that will impact you as an applicant? I know a lot of people ask, what are you looking for in a resident? But you also, again, just like Rizul said, this is your life. You need to say, how will the program support me in these different ways? And maybe I'm lacking in one place. How will the program be available? What resources are there for me? And maybe I think, the program could use a little bit of something. Are you receptive to feedback? Do you respect resident opinions? I think I would ask a lot of questions on less about what could be found on the websites, how many cataract cases am I going to get by the time I graduate, and more on how will you treat me as a human being and how you care about me, and will this feel congruent throughout all of my rotations? Because, a lot of people underestimate the intern year and we're so focused on the ophthalmology side of things. Thank goodness University of Wisconsin has such a phenomenal intern year and, people that treat us well. But actually, this is the one thing I would change. I would ask a lot more about the intern year and what that looks like, because that kind of sets even though, a lot of people say this isn't your specialty, you can just kind of learn what you can and move on. I think, this is setting the foundation of being a subspecialist. And if you go to a place that supports you well enough, I think the transition into doing ophthalmology is going to be a little bit better. Obviously, I'm not there yet, but maybe Aziza can touch on that some more.
Well, I think I kind of agree with Alana. Because it worked out well, I don't think I would have changed anything. I think all the experiences and kind of all the ups and downs of the application cycle and kind of doubting yourself, did I make the right decision? Did I, always after an interview, you're like, did I really say that? And you question yourself, and there's just questioning yourselves along the way. But I don't think there was anything that I would do differently. Everything that I did, obviously, it worked out. So I don't think that there's any one kind of cookie cutter or roadmap that if you do X, Y, and Z, then you're guaranteed to match, because you're not guaranteed to match. And I think any of the applicants can look onto the AptoMatch Excel sheet and you can see that there's people who had incredible scores, who had incredible experiences and, applications in amazing journals and didn't match. So it's not about, no one has the perfect application. And sometimes it doesn't work out and you don't match. And hey, it's not you. It's that there were so many applicants and everyone is great. So I don't think that it's a reflection on you if you don't match. And I don't think that there's any one key thing that if you do match, yes, it was, I can pinpoint, I can say yes, because I did this research rotation or because I did, XYZ, that's why it worked out. I think I also agree with Alana. I got it in my 4th year with Rep Venable and I got involved. That's where I met Rasul. Just having a lot of people, huge name people in ophthalmology and just being able to bounce ideas off of them, I think really helped me. And I think that's kind of where I became more confident talking to Dr. Knight, talking to Dr. Nwaniwu. It's just, you are hearing from people who are experts in this field and they're telling you, yeah, you're a great applicant. Don't worry about it. You're going to do fine. And it's just having that just a little bit of push. And I remember Dr. Knight just saying, like, at this point, it's on you. You need to advocate for yourself. There's really nothing else that anyone can do for you. If you got the interview, they are genuinely interested in you and you have just as much as a shot as, the next person. So once you're at that interview portion, you just need to advocate for yourself and sell yourself at that point.
Yeah. Do you mind if I interject here?
Sure, absolutely.
This is also about Dr. Knight. Truly one of the greatest mentors. One thing he said, once you get your interview, they love you on paper. They just want to know who you are as a person. So because you're kind of in that position, they already know that they want you. They just want to make sure that your goals and your values or whatever are in alignment with the program. So this is where you get to get picky. You don't have to settle here. Obviously, everybody wants to match, but this is where you need to figure out what's the most important to you. What do you care about? And can you put, your boots on the ground and work to show them to get there? I think that really resonated heavily with me because just like Aziza said, there was a lot of doubt when I was going into some of my interviews. Like, are they going to bring up, oh gosh, you failed step 1. Why do you think that you're going to be a good surgeon? Like, why do you think you qualify for this? And some of my interviewers, I don't think, it was coming from a malicious place. It's just more to see how have you grown and being able to talk and share. So you get to be picky here. You don't have to settle for a program. One thing that I think really resonated me when I was having a lot of doubt and, not hearing back from programs that I had really hoped to hear from and really hoped to be interviewing with. You don't have to beg a program to choose you. And do you want to be in a program that you have to beg to be a part of? Is that going to be a place that's going to support you and nurture you and help you grow into the type of ophthalmologist that you want to be? And I think that's one of the things that I loved so much about Wisconsin is that they were willing to see, me as a human person, see my faults, see where I could grow and still be willing to support me and help me become the best professional that they can help shape me into as long as I'm willing to work for it. So try to find a program that supports you as a person and not just as, an A++ on your application.
Yeah. And, I think that's really important. Really intelligent people kind of start putting a lot of doubt in themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've thought about ophthalmology and you made that educated decision that you want to pursue ophthalmology, you definitely are above average in the sense that you are willing to work hard to get into it and even apply. I think we don't appreciate how much resource goes into even compiling the application itself. Like SF Match, the amount of things that you want to put in and how you have to carefully curate your application, it's not a joke. It's a completely separate application cycle from the ERAS application. So you are committing to something well knowing that this is what you want to pursue with your heart. So, many people harp on mentorship for interview invites, but how has your opinion changed in assessing where in the process of matching a mentor can help? And that can include reading through your application. And that can include a mentor perhaps trying to reach out to a program to get you an interview. And even afterwards. So looking back, where do you think those pivotal points were so that those who do have mentors who are well-meaning but don't know how to help you can learn on how to help their specific applicants?
I would probably say early and often is always best. You want to have a person that you have a longitudinal relationship with if possible. Now, obviously, if you're on a bit of a time crunch, or maybe you just met this incredible mentor and it's 2 months before applications are due, you have to work with what you've got. But if you can establish a mentor that's invested in your well-being as early as possible, I think that is what's going to be crucial, because they're going to be able to write you a really strong letter of recommendation, like knowing who you are as a person and not just, how you can do your slit lamp exam or how you work in the clinic or, what your workflow is, but what is important to you, how much grit do you have, how hard are you willing to work. I think those are all things that are established with time and, how you overcome hardships. All of those little things you gain, I think, with a bit of a longer relationship. I think the most pivotal points of having a mentor, if you don't have a longitudinal one, you want to have one when you're about to submit your applications, because having some guidance on matching your application to what the program is kind of looking for and being not necessarily to be pessimistic, but to be realistic about your application and what the school is looking for is very important, because obviously you want to shoot for the stars, but sometimes you don't want to waste your money or waste your resources or waste your time on a program that's going to write you off because you're missing this one little checkbox on your application. So I think establishing who you're going to apply to is crucial. Number two, obviously, when it comes to letters of recommendation, you want to make sure that you have mentors, both in ophthalmology and also outside of ophthalmology, if you can, that can just speak to who you are, what your character is, the type of, are you the type of physician that they would be comfortable you caring for their families? And I think my letters were something that really stood out during all of my interviews when, the interviewers would ask, this person wrote this glowing letter of recommendation about you. I think the probably last pivotal stage is when you're creating your rank list. So after you've already, had all your interviews and exactly the schools that you have a chance to match at, how are you going to navigate ranking? And once you kind of set your own, a lot of my peers, they would make their own Excel sheets with like location and like number of procedures that you get done and what the climate would be or whatever is important to you. Do they support you having a family? Like all those things. Once you get all of what's important to you to the side and, what little nuances you've learned through your interviews, once you talk to your mentors who have experience, they might have network of people there. They might have experience. Maybe they trained at that program, or maybe they have a fellow who trained at that program who can share some insight. So I think that was when my mentors were introducing me to people to give me a real further inside scoop. Like, okay, this is real. I could end up spending the next 4-5 years of my life at this program. This is where I need to kind of get to the nitty gritty. And my mentors are really helpful in helping me create my rank list based on what my needs were, based on what my wants were, based on the community that would be available for me through the people they knew in their network. And they knew that, having a good support system was important to me. And that's kind of what goes back to wanting to have a longitudinal mentor. They can know what your needs are and help adapt the mentoring that they give you based on the type of person that you are. So yeah, my mentors were very helpful in that regard. And then also having a mentor that you can call and cry on, like just the stress of like, okay, it's 24 hours before I have to submit my list. And now I don't know if I want my number 1 to be my number 4, or just kind of the back and forth worries of residency. So I think those are probably if I could only choose a couple points, that would be when I would lean on my mentors the most.
I agree. And I will say that when I did find a mentor who was incredibly involved, I realized, well, this is what mentorship looks like. And that is so special to be able to talk with somebody through your vulnerabilities is really important. One thing, as you were talking, Alana, I realized both of us had female mentors.
Yeah.
And so did Aziza. So I feel like in a way that's so needed for a female applicant. And I think that's not a fault of anybody of the other gender. I think it's just that there's this motherly touch to an older female coming along and putting you under their arms and saying, hey, I'll be your mentor. And
I think it's also very empowering.
It's very empowering. When you're thinking about
abilities.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of want to explore that if you guys have time later on about mentorship. But I think overall, I think it was just such a great feeling to have somebody that I could confide in and feel like, yeah, I can talk to this person a lot about a lot of things. And then you gain a lot of life experiences from them as well. Mm-hmm. Like stories about how they raised their children, how they navigated a tough academic environment to now becoming a full professor, tenure track and so forth. But that's not an easy thing to accomplish with with a family. So Aziza, do you have anything to add to what Alana has mentioned about those pivotal points? Do you think that, I think for the most part, Alana has covered the beginning parts of where a mentor can help, but do you think that the mentor, when you have tracked down a program, did you have them reach out to your number one program?
So I think the key that Alana mentioned is it has to be early. You can't, your application's already in and you think you're going to find a mentor and that mentor is going to advocate for you and call programs and speak great, amazing things on your behalf. I met my mentor, Dr. Rachel Lieberman, in my second year of medical school, meeting regularly, like once a month, asking me updates, life updates, school updates. What rotations are you on? What's going well? What isn't going well? So it's having that established relationship that not only can they say, okay, this is how they're performing in medical school, but this is how I know them as a human being. And this is how I know they'll be a great fit. So I think having a very personal relationship with a mentor, they don't have to be, somebody very big in the academic world of ophthalmology. My mentor was a ophthalmologist at Nellis Air Force Base. Amazing human being, took me under her wing. Pretty much, when I was doubting myself, she would tell me, I don't understand why you're afraid. Like, I don't understand why you're doubting yourself. So it's just nice to kind of be vulnerable and speak all those things to that person and that person come back and tell you, no, you're actually doing great. Like all the things that you're minimizing that you've done, like you don't see your accomplishments and you don't see how great you're doing because it's not matching up to what everyone else is doing. So I think just having someone kind of say, no, I think you're doing fine is great. I think when it came to application time, yeah, she was someone that I had kind of reach out to programs and kind of advocate for me. But I think the key is you can't expect a mentor to call. You need to kind of, I guess, narrow down who you really want to target. I think mentors are amazing human beings, but they're not miracle workers. They can't get you every interview invite and they can't get you matched. If your mentor has a connection to this program that you're really interested in, I think that's where they can have the highest impact. The advice I was given by someone else, if a program is not interested in you, a phone call from some random, ophthalmologist really isn't going to be that big of an impact. But if this person graduated from the medical residency program, or that person works at that residency program, or they have some connection or some affiliation, they can say, hey, I can speak to this person's, work ethic or who they are as human being. I think that's where it'll count the most. Otherwise, I'm not sure what benefit it really would have.
And that is such a really important statement to make. And I say this because we focus on finding the mentor and we put a lot of weight on the mentor, right? And that's how we're kind of like perceiving this whole match journey, that we have to find a mentor, somebody in ophthalmology, somebody with power, and bam, we'll get into ophthalmology residence.
Bippity boppity boop.
But that's not how it works, which brings me to the point of what makes a good mentee. And what if I were to ask you 2 qualities that you think will help a mentee become a great mentee, not only for their mentor, but also for themselves to match into ophthalmology, what would that be?
I think as a mentee, you have to be, the ball is in your court, you have to be proactive. To sit back and think this very busy person is, wondering, oh, well, my mentee hasn't reached out to me. Maybe I should check in on them. And some are fantastic and do that and understand. But I think it's really on you to be proactive, for you to, they're busy. You send an email, they don't respond. And many, many people that I've come across, like, I would love to be a mentor and I would love that. And if I don't respond to you the first time, email me again. It's probably that I, didn't see it. I think it's that fear of people saying no or things like that, or you're bothering or you're being a nuisance. I don't think that anyone who's willing to mentor ever looks at your text messages or emails or attempts to contact as bothersome. So take that initiative, be proactive. I would, email my mentor and say, hey, I just started, or I just took my shelf and this is the score I got and I'm feeling great. Like, update your mentor often, because you're establishing that connection that, a year, 2 years down the line, they're not going, who is this person? So I think there's a lot more that it's on the mentee to kind of be more proactive and initiating a lot of things because this person is, a physician. They have a family. They're doing research. There's a lot of things on their plate that maybe it slips their mind. So I think it's on you to kind of make those initiate those kind of.
Yes, I definitely agree. I was one of those applicants that was afraid to be annoying. And I actually had Dr. Law, she told me, you need to be borderline annoying because I can't care more than you. And it just really reframed the way that I think about what my goals are and how persistent I need to be without, obviously crossing a line. But if this is my dream, I need to make sure that I'm showing up the way that my mentors need me to show up, to put the work in, to get the outcomes that I'm looking for, to ask for advice when I need it, to ask as many questions as possible. I think you have to be very persistent if the end goal is, to end up matching and to end up in your dream career. You have to be very persistent and you can't wait on your mentors to check on you. It's just things aren't going to happen as quickly as you need them to. And sometimes they might not get done.
And there's a very fine line. I think every time anybody who's an introvert worries about annoying somebody, they think about being disrespectful, and that's hard. You're dealing with a surgeon mentor, and we all have seen Grey's Anatomy. We all know what the caveats can be, and you don't want to be disrespectful and burn a bridge, right? So the way that you approach it is you have these small things that you've accomplished in your life and you build those connections, like Aziza said, and keeping your mentor in the loop. I think we all resonate with people's journeys in different ways. I think all three of us have come together in this forum because we resonate with each of our struggles in getting into ophthalmology. And had we just approached each other as if we were carrying this application with us and saying, hey, how high was your step score? How many publications do you have? And stuff like that's not going to convince anybody that maybe I should help this person. So being vulnerable and carrying a natural conversation with somebody and treating them like human beings is really important. I'm surprised always to find somebody who's so accomplished in ophthalmology. Just be a normal person, talk about normal things.
The thing I forgot to mention is to be a good mentee, I think it's very important to have a list of goals and things that you want to achieve. That way that you're checking in with your mentor as routinely as possible if you're not moving towards those goals. And then your mentor also knows what their expectations are from you. Because if you're just hey, I want a mentor, and they're okay, well, for what? Well, you have to kind of figure out exactly what you're looking for and also have actionable steps that you can take and that you can ask for advising from your mentor to help both of you kind of make the relationship as fruitful as it could be.
Okay. On that note, Alana, you bring up a great point. So imagine I'm this new person trying to get into ophthalmology. My end goal is to get into ophthalmology residency, okay? It's a big ask to approach a mentor and say, hey, the purpose why I'm approaching you is because I want to get into ophthalmology residency. How do you dissect that into small accomplishable goals and not overwhelm a mentor and have them run away? Because that happens. It's a big ask to put that responsibility into someone. And we were talking, no mentor is going to really be the magic pill that gets you in, right?
Mm-hmm. I like this scenario a lot. I think some really good advice that I got was to ask your mentors, what do you need to see from me in general? And I know that's still kind of a big question, but asking your mentors what exactly it is that you want. And I know sometimes that sounds funny, but if you know that, ophthalmology requires you to have maybe a research publication or at least involvement in research, they're looking for maybe some sort of community outreach. They're looking for grades, which you've probably already got. But I think to make things actionable, you need to know exactly what you want. So if your overarching goal is matching in ophthalmology, if you write down and you figure out exactly what are the 10 top things that applicant reviewers are looking for, and maybe you don't know what that is, you could even start there. You could say, hi, Dr. XYZ. My ultimate goal is to match into ophthalmology. I know that I need to do this and this and this. What do you think that I'm missing? And what should I prioritize to work on? And that way, if you don't really know where to start, you can have 2 or 3 things that you can work from to then make actionable steps. So if they say you need to do research, then you can say, okay, my first step is to find research that I'm interested in. I can find a research mentor whose goals are in alignment with mine. And then I would always break it down into something that was very digestible. It's kind of how I like to study too. Like, what are the small chunks that I can realistically get done? And let's say that let's stick with the research prompt. What do I care about? I care about inequities in healthcare. Who do I know that's involved in health equity research? And then you can just kind of start there. So as small and digestible as possible. I hope this answers the question, but figuring out exactly what you want is the first step. And then once you know what you want, you can start to brainstorm, what are the things that I need? And if you don't know, then that's where you ask your mentor, okay, this is the one question that I'm going to start with. I know that I want to do research, and this is where I'm going to ask for help.
That's fair. But oftentimes, I think, we underestimate the time it takes to finish a research project and to have a produce that you can give for application.
Mm-hmm.
And not to digress from the question of, am I fit to apply into residency? Is this doable? Is this something that will get me into residency, right? So how do you make sure that the research part isn't taking away from that main goal? Because oftentimes you have to keep redirecting the conversation back to, hey, maybe my project isn't done by the time I apply. So how do I make sure that there are other components of my application that are more appealing for me to finally get into ophthalmology residency?
It's actually really funny that you say that, because when I applied to residency, my manuscript was not done. And I was like, oh goodness, like I did this big research year, and now like I don't really have anything on paper to show for it. But I think what's more important is having the passion of your work and knowing the type of work that you're doing. And as long as you have the framework of, hey, I've been working on this project and maybe it's been 2.5 years, but this is what we found so far, I think that component of the application is solid. And yes, it is very easy to get stuck in the research portion, but you have to, just like with your personal life, you need to make sure that you're making time for multiple aspects of who you are holistically. So if you find yourself, oh gosh, like I'm spending 95% of my research and it's not going anywhere, and I stopped going to my extracurriculars, and I, didn't care about being president of the ophthalmology interest group, and I didn't care about shadowing anymore, you kind of should probably reel yourself in. And again, go back to that list of what are the things that I want to accomplish. I would write it on a sticky note or put it on like a board and say, am I shying away from things 2 through 5 on the list of things that make a well-rounded applicant?
Right. And that's a great way of putting it. And also sharing that, when you do a research share, the goal is obviously publication, but you have to understand, let's be realistic. When people do a PhD, they're coming out with 2 or 3 papers. To expect that you will have twice, thrice, 4 times as many in just a year of research is kind of, right? And yet that is often the expectation that we're grounded with when we pursue a research share. So that's a great point that Alana has mentioned, to try and make sure that your mentorship is meaningful and you don't detract from the ultimate goal. So going into the other side, which is the side that I think we all want to be, I want to start off with Aziza. You're a PGY2, you're done with intern year, you're starting fresh in ophthalmology. We're all like within six or 7 months into our respective years. What nuances of ophthalmology has surprised you that you didn't anticipate when you were entering ophthalmology?
I think, like we've said already, we don't get much exposure into ophthalmology. We know, hey, you have a cataract, you do cataract surgery. I think how much prep and how much actually goes into the cataract surgery planning and coordinating for one patient is incredible. So I'm kind of at the point where I'm able to work up a patient. I can sign them up for the cataract surgery. I can deem, yes, okay, you're at the point where your cataract needs to come out. But then there's just so much planning that goes into it. It's not just schedule them and go. One thing that our program does in intern year is our anesthesia portion of the rotation is we are actually working with the anesthesia team to kind of clear patients for surgery. So you're doing all that kind of background work of, is this person, a good candidate for MEC? Is this person good for general? So there's all that planning and working that we get to do. And okay, yes, I am saying I'm clearing this patient for surgery. We can move forward. Then there's, them coming in for the workup, the measurements. One of the questions is, have you ever had eye trauma? And understanding that if they've had any, damage to any, the tiny structures in your eye, so much changes. I think for me, it's understanding it's not just, okay, this person's scheduled for surgery, we're going to take out the cataract. There's so much planning and so many measurements that, almost every cataract surgery is tailored to that one patient. And just that precision is even more impressive than, I love it now more than ever. Just understanding like how much detail we go into, and the eye is so tiny, but it's so precise.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting how lengthy the process is from recruiting the patient for the cataract surgery to now like operating on them. So that alone is very surprising.
Okay.
Now, as interns, we can all agree, Alana and I, that recruiting the patient for these cataract surgery is perhaps the most important part of it. I'm told to give them 3 brochures of different lenses that they would prefer. And it's often a very privileged position to be able to inform the benefits, the risks, costs, all those things.
Agreed.
Love that conversation. You pull out the model of the eye and then what happened, it's like, this is amazing.
Quite the difference from medical school time when you would just be like, I think this person has a cataract.
Yep, it's there.
You definitely see it. And for Alana, as an intern, how do you prepare for your designated ophthalmology weeks? And was there anyone who helped you prepare for the intern year?
Yeah. So to preface, I'd like to say that our intern year, it's divvied between internal medicine, surgery, anesthesia, as Aziza mentioned. And all of those specialties are mixed together, but our ophthalmology block is actually one dedicated 3-month block at some point in the year. And so to be completely honest, I have been mostly focusing on internal medicine and studying for step 3 and less on focusing on ophthalmology. I will say that I've got my second book of the BCSC here. I was reading through the first one just to kind of get through my intern year and just like the general, how general medicine applies to ophthalmology, but I haven't been doing too much to prepare for ophthalmology at all. I can't wait to get there and be, doing ophthalmology forever. I start in March and I'm so excited. But I think, as far as preparation, just making sure that when I am doing my step 3 questions, if there's any ocular involvement in the vignette, that I'm taking a second and just reading through what are the common, diagnoses or what treatment needs to go with the specific ailment that maybe the patient has, and just kind of reading up there. But I'm not doing any dedicated ophthalmology prep yet. I'll probably start that when I start my ophthalmology rotation in March. Otherwise, preparing for intern year, Aziza actually kind of took me under her wing before I got here. And this goes for anybody in any residency program. You should find a person that is established in the program that is willing to invest in you as a person and to kind of give you all of the tips and tricks and like the little inside scoop on certain rotations and, how to be the most successful and how to advocate for yourself. And so exactly. Where the best bathroom to go number 2 is, like the little things, it ends up really mattering. So I think I would recommend that you don't study anything. Anyone who hasn't started residency yet, don't study anything in the months leading up to residency. You'll have plenty of time once you're in residency and, seeing patients. But before then, I recommend that you rest and digest as much as possible. And then when you get to the intern year, just kind of take things in strides, ask for as much help as possible. That's something that I think has been really beneficial for me, is just kind of putting my pride aside and saying, hey, I actually don't remember what, flagell is. I don't know what metronidazole is. Like letting yourself be humble and ask a lot of questions makes the intern year a lot easier.
And it's kind of scary. Like initially when you start intern year, there's a lot of things but they're like the very back of your mind. And slowly as you're making your way through intern year, they're like pulled to the front and you're like, yeah, oh, I remember that. So, I think rest and digest is really important prior to starting intern year, because I don't think anybody can prepare any of us for intern year. And then for residency in general, I think Aziza can agree that call is quite a different feeling.
Thank God for buddy call.
So before we kind of conclude this, any parting thoughts looking back on how you approached this journey? Things that you would tell your former self to be like, hey, you don't have to stress about this or stress about this, you know?
I think looking back, and I don't know if you remember how we had this conversation of applications were submitted, rank lists were submitted. And, oh my God, what if? And I think my kind of thoughts were like, I'm done. Whatever happens, happens. You're at the point, we're almost there. Like interviews are almost done. There's still, people, a few more interviews left, but you gave it your all. You did your best. Wasting all that time until February, wondering and panicking, and it's not going to do anything. So I think I kind of committed to, I'm going to enjoy the rest of this time. I'm not going to think about anything. And that, first week in February, I'll deal with the outcome then. But I also am a firm believer that no matter what happens, there's a reason and there's a plan. And if things don't work out for you this cycle, there's a reason for it. Things will always work out the way they're supposed to. I mean, I've talked to people who applied to different specialties. I've talked to people who didn't match, the first cycle and ended up matching, subsequent cycles, or people who applied for fellowship and didn't match. And each and every one of them has said it worked out the best way possible. Like, yeah, okay, I applied to ophthalmology and didn't match. I didn't realize PM&R was for me. Or I applied to glaucoma and I didn't match. I didn't realize that I'd be really happy and comprehensive. So it's going to work out no matter what.
I definitely echo Aziza's sentiments. I think that I would recommend that you focus on what you can control, because once the application is in, you can ask, just like Aziza said, like, bless you. Just like Aziza said, our mentors don't know, or they're not miracle workers. So as long as you put as concerted an effort forward as you can, and the application is in, there's no into ripping your hair out and stressing yourself out and, thinking worst case scenario. While it is probably beneficial to have some sort of plan B as a just in case. And I know a lot of people who did pre-residency fellowships. Having a plan B, I think, is obviously incredible, but focusing on what you can control, spending time with your family, cleaning your house, finding things that can distract you in the meantime, and just knowing that I put my best foot forward and things are going to work out exactly the way that they're supposed to. And sometimes you might be surprised, I have a lot of friends that weren't thrilled, not even just in ophthalmology, but they weren't thrilled that they didn't match at their number 1 or maybe even their number 5. And then they got to the residency program and they were blown away and they didn't expect, what they were walking into. So keep an open mind, keep an open heart, try to be as grateful as possible, and just kind of go with the flow.
Yeah. And I loved both of your responses, Aziza and Alana. I think those are, standard pearls about controlling the things that are in your control. Because honestly, if you knew what is happening in the background, you would realize how many things are already decided for, right? And to rack your head and your time, which is, I'm finding out, is the most meaningful thing in your life, it is such a waste of your talent, waste of your, abilities. And I'm so glad that we did this session here. One thing that I want to do at the end and make it a tradition for our podcast is we're all going to be in the OR one day. So at some point you're going to be banning the iPod or whatever they're calling it now. What song would you play if you had only one song to play? And I'll start with Aziza.
Okay. I will start by saying our old program director, Dr. Liveris, who is retired now, never got to operate with him, but I have heard that he likes to play Frank Sinatra. So I very much regret that I never got to operate with him. But my song would be, it's a Frank Sinatra song called My Way. And that's I listened to it throughout the application cycle, and my application wasn't perfect. My, path wasn't perfect, but I did it my way, and it worked out my way. So that's the kind of song that I reflect on.
It's wonderful and very precious, actually.
I love that. I think that's very special.
And I'm gonna play the drum rolls to see what Alana's favorite is, just for
the listeners, I couldn't figure out what song I wanted to play in the beginning, but I think that I would go with Magic Hour by Janae Aiko. It's a very uplifting song, kind of helps to recenter me and, waiting for the magic hour of everything that we've been working for to come to fruition and just kind of focusing on that. And that could be in life, that could be in cataract surgery. Like, hey, I worked this hard. I want to get this patient with an excellent outcome. It's very soothing. I love R&B. I think it speaks a testament to my journey and also always looking for the best outcomes regardless of your circumstances.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful conclusion to this segment, I think. To be able to find two individuals who have really fought for their place in ophthalmology and are working towards achieving the greatness that is required of them to treat every patient that comes through the door. It's one of those things that still feels surreal, but when you do accomplish it with the people that you shared this journey with, it makes it all the more meaningful. So thank you, Aziza and Alana, for coming out here tonight. I know residency is incredibly busy, but it means a lot to me that you both are sharing this platform with me and speaking about your experiences after all the things are well said and done.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here and great to see you again too.